And that concludes that section.
All right. All right. If anybody doesn't have any questions on purchase order history, then we can move on.
Call me later if you want to close it.
Right.
Nothing surprised us.
Okay. All right. Okay, so we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is the item 8, monthly band B&I report, outliers and band changes for PAC.
This stems from the B&I where we were providing the opportunity for outliers and band changes to make sure that nobody was short in the residential settings. And this particular month, we still have 5 pending review. A lot of times people will submit, and if they don't provide us enough documentation, we will recontact them and leave them in a pending status. But the applications have trickled down to only 5 pending. We have none to even offer the commission this month. So I think that's an illustration that this program is probably coming to its logical conclusion. But we'll give it another month or so to make sure everybody has a fair opportunity to, and they can still apply for band changes and outliers at any time. It's just, I think we probably want to bring this phase of the band B&I to an end and then handle them in the normal course of business. We have nothing to report this month.
Okay. All right. Okay, if anyone doesn't have any questions, then we'll move on to the next item, which is on
So
the,
basically, that was informational, I guess we're saying.
yes,
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
informational, yeah. Right.
Just the current status of it.
The last one we approved, the last request, outlier request that we approved was how many months ago? Do you recall that?
We've been doing it for May, June, and July.
Did in July, we approved some and disapproved others.
Right, I remember, right,
3 different batches so far.
okay.
Total's about maybe 260,000 total.
All right,
And I said, in that meeting, how thankful I was that we had
yeah,
a program now instead of the way they used to do it
right,
years ago where it was, we're not being treated fairly.
right,
That's because we're not being treated fairly. But
yeah,
But they are much more now, so we're thankful for that.
yeah, that's a good thing. All right, well then we will move on to fee for service update. Pat?
Just as a reminder, the key hurdle that we have to get over to get the fee for service is for the IDRD waiver renewal, which is being actively worked by everybody in this building and policy division in particular, and at HHS, is to get our current band settings into individual settings in the waiver, so individual rates in the fee for service. I can say that July has been very, very hectic and busy for all parties, and I want to thank HHS personally because they are doing triple time over there, trying to get all the data they need for their rate setters or actuary to build out the assumptions for the rates. It's my understanding that the fiscal year 19 cost report has been factored into their calculations, and we'll talk about that at the end about how much excess costs we have in the system. That's very helpful for rates. But as I was told multiple times here the last couple of days as I'm probing around, it's not over till it's over, and they have every expectation to try to get them done and in the IDRD waiver renewal, but it's not over till it's over. So I can't say it's 100%. From my perspective, things are all moving in the right direction, but we can't afford to have any obstacles, and we'll keep on giving them the information they need. And I can assure you they're doing everything they can. They're very motivated to get into the waiver renewal so that we can, it solves a lot of problems, and for them, it permits people to track bill, which is another sore spot for many, many years, and I think that would be positive all the way around. So I would hopefully in the next, I'd hopefully certainly by, I mean, they have to turn the product in on October 1st, so that's the deadline. But I'm hoping that sometime in the not too distant future that we'll have maybe a hard draft that we can feel comfortable with knowing exactly how it's going to play out.
And once the waiver is renewed, what's like the very next step after that in the sense of what has to happen next to move the system?
If, like, right now, we have like how we're going to mechanically go to fee for service with like the backroom operations. I think it's going to be much easier than converting the at-home services.
Right.
We have to get the green light that it is going to happen. And we have to get the proposed rates, and I don't think the proposed rates are going to be finalized until CMS approves them, but we have to move in that direction. So once we kind of get the comfort level that it's going to happen, we'll probably have, 3.5 months to do all the backroom operations to make it happen. And we would basically realign our current approximately 4,000 waiver residential settings into the new IDRD residential settings, which align for the most part similarly to how they are now. It's just that they actually have different rates based on different levels of needs, of which staffing is the predominant differential. So we would basically have to get everything organized so that by when the waiver goes into effect, that we literally can take the new rates that are in the renewal and start paying them. That would be the biggest logistical thing from the aging perspective.
So in your viewpoint, we would not be able to go to fee for service at the very earliest, completely change the system until mid-year next year. Is that what you're thinking?
In January, if
Is it going to take
these
several
individual
months?
rates are given for the individual settings in the waiver, we will have to go on January 1st of 22.
So it can be immediate, I guess.
It would be immediate. We would have to do it.
Okay. I didn't know if there was going to be some other layers of things that have to be done
That's the start date.
before we
It
can.
doesn't nothing else has to be, I don't think. But the other thing I would ask is how many different rates would we have, do you think? There's been a lot of talk about.
We have right now, we have 14 or 15 different residential rates. And we're going to go down to 8.
Oh, 8.
Simplify it.
I thought there was talk of 3 houses.
No. And the vast majority of our people will be in the 4-person group home. And that bleeds over to the people in CRCF will be treated similarly as a 4-person group home as far as rates. And that they may change that a little bit. They may put in some sort of modifier, but.
And again, for those watching, that's HHS sets the rates, not us, right?
They're the rate setters.
That's right. So anybody out there watching, we're not the rate setters.
All right. Well, that's good to know that we might be doing.
Not until it's over, but
in January,
everybody's doing all they can
because
do.
our original deadline was the end of this year. So.
That's right. So we would be very happy if that were to happen.
Right. Okay. Well, we certainly appreciate everybody working really hard to make it happen.
They have, HHS is
And
really
especially
bending over backwards. I appreciate it.
the HHS for their support and action to do what has to be done. So definitely appreciative of that. So.
Couldn't agree with you more.
I mean,
That's well overdue, but thankful it's happening.
yeah. Okay. So anything else, Pat, on fee for service in terms of the update?
That's the biggest step ahead of us.
Great. Okay, then we can move on to the FY22 spending plan, item 10 on the agenda.
All right. It's page 22 of your PDF. And there's 4 components. Because there's so much data, I'm trying to chunk it to meet the reader's needs. On page 22 is what I would call the high-level spending plan of revenues and expenditures. And page 23 is the detailed spending plan where I'll tell you how we did that. And then we on page 24, we itemized this year's increases to our base spending plan baseline. And then on page 25, I gave you a copy of what we call it our administrative contract, which is basically our overhead. So that if you want to look at our overhead, you can look at that as well. I mean, that's certainly one of the areas that stakeholders look at. That's one of the areas that we look at. And that's one of the areas we can control most. What I want to bring your attention to this year's spending plan, as opposed to maybe prior year's spending plans, is that our spending plan includes not only the waiver services, the regional centers, all the things that we know, but we also have a state plan medical component that for many years wasn't even in our spending plan. We considered it just kind of a wash transaction, and we did not report in our budget. And we put it in our budget 100% this year and itemized, and you can see it on the detail section. The other thing I want to bring attention to is we've talked about it for a number of years. I think we've all been a little dissatisfied with our spending plan budget as it goes through the year because we are so under budget all the time. And we would caveat, I know Chris before me as well as myself, is the problem with that is when we set up our spending plan, it is built on 100% of the service, the 100% price of the services we provide, which is the correct way to do it. When we execute our budget, because our provider network, particularly our at-home services, they bill through HHS. So they will bill HHS for PCA, for example. HHS will pay them $17 an hour. And then, just for simplicity purposes, HHS will claim the Medicaid reimbursement because they paid the bill, and they'll come back around to us and get the state match from us. Well, the state match, removing all the FMAP exceptions that we've experienced with COVID, is about 30%. And we pay the 30% match and be done. What that would do with our spending plan is our budget is budgeted at the 100% price, and yet we might have $120,000 of purchases going through HHS, of which we pay 30%, which would be, $3.6 million. So our spending is actually, would come over here, and we'd always look like we're under budget. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And so what we're going to do this year is we are going to monthly continue to do that, but we're going to find that gap that I'll call it, it's a wash transaction. That 70% that HHS claims reimbursement for gets paid, rightfully so. We'll disclose that on our spending plan so that you can see that gap. And what that will do, it will bring us more to an apples and apples comparison of what we're spending to our spending plan. Okay, and that's just the difference. And so when you look at the numbers here, if you go to page 23, I'll just tell you how we worked it up. On page 23, there's three categories. We did three separate processes to get to our final budget. On the left-hand side are all the categories of expenses and revenues. And the reason we put them together is because we're trying to illustrate that for the vast majority of our expenditures, there's an immediate and corresponding 70% revenue, the reimbursement. And that way you can visualize what's generating revenue and what's not generating revenue. And all we did for our first line for fiscal year 22 operating baseline budget was we took our fiscal year 21 expenditures, rolled them forward, and we did make adjustments for trends that we saw, not in our overhead, but trends that we saw in service utilization. For example, during the COVID year, we had a increase in residential daily habilitation because our individuals couldn't get out of the homes. They were there all the time, so actually revenue went up. We had to tweak that down because this year, coming out of COVID, at least we thought we were coming out of COVID, but we will come out of COVID. We anticipate that revenue to go down a little bit. On the utilization side, we consider respite. Respite goes up about $2 million a year. So we tweak that just at the margin, what we consider realistic trends. And we came down to a final, what we call baseline budget, where what we're telling you is that's the same as 21 with incremental adjustments based on trends of our utilization. And then the next two columns is the fiscal year 22 appropriation increases. We got about $23 million in recurring appropriations. No, we got $23 million in appropriations, 17 recurring, and maybe 5 one-year money that we had to put in our budget. And obviously, we have little discretion on where it goes because the legislature has, we asked for it to be spent in a certain way. They gave it to us, so we have to spend it in that way. And then there's another 12 million in there for the 2.5% COLAs for ourselves and our healthcare network. And there's a 1% increase in pension costs. So there's another 12 million that's going to have to go into our system through appropriations. And then when you add those two columns together, the last column you see, which is called fiscal year 22 increase of baseline budget, that is DDSN staff recommending about $4 million of increases in spending. And to me, obviously we need to scrutinize those and justify why we think we need increases. And we can always go back into our baseline budget and re-examine moving the base around, but certainly that $4 million is new. It's new money. It's new requests for money. And then what we did on page 24, we itemized those requests so that you individually can see what we need the money for. And so my recommendation is for us to talk about this $4 million in increases so you can see what staff is asking for. And in here, we can increase it or decrease it because it's very appropriate for commission members during the deliberative process. If you think there's more needs for certain things, we can move this around. It's still a draft document. But the increases are I consider very conservative, and if I have a chance, I'll just go over them. You'll see essentially the first 8 or 9 are all technology driven, penetration testing, cyber liability insurance. Cyber liability insurance, we looked at that deeply. We do not have to spend $50,000 for liability insurance. However, and I got Mike Mickey here, and just from my own personal experience, if we ever had an intrusion, the cost of notification, providing free credit reviews, and all the pain and suffering that goes along with it, it could be several $1 million. So I believe it is worth $50,000 insurance, and all we have to do is look on the news every night, and you can see the intrusions and ransoms are just going through the roof. And we do have a network with 10,000 remote users, so I think we're higher risk than most. So I think it's a good investment. Email archiving solution. That's a solution so that we can maintain full compliance with archiving emails to meet the state record requirement. We need improvement in that area. So I think that's to meet minimum compliance. So I think that's a good idea. Microsoft licensing, $60,000 for business intelligence, which is really, we've talked about that a number of times before, but I'm firmly convinced that once we get that up and running, that is going to make everybody better because information will be more accurate and more easily obtainable. $120,000 for 810 individual licenses so that every employee of DDSN has a DDSN email. Right now, many, if not most of the regional centers do not have a DDSN email address. And it's more than just, I said, Mike, can't we just give away a Gmail and call it a day? And of course, Mike corrected me on that. That it has many, many different benefits to it. And I'm gonna let Mike just mention that because it is compelling the information security risk that's out there that we are tightening up by a few simple things. Mike?
Yeah, so a lot of what this account does, currently about 400 or 500 employees are able to log into a computer and actually perform office functions, send email, do Teams meeting and things like that. But there are a number of employees, about 800, that doesn't have that capability. So we can't expand technology to the entire agency because they don't have the simple ability to log into the computer. So when you get into developing a portal where people can share information, collaborate, newsletters, things like that, and also send an email to the entire agency, right? Active shooter alerting systems and all that other stuff. We don't have the ability to expand our technology because we're limited in logins, if you will. And that's some of the basic functionality of an organization or progressive agency. So it's a cost that they've curbed over the years, but we see some technology coming on the horizon that we could benefit as an agency. And this is just a start to enable us to introduce some of those technologies to the agency. So when we talk about mobile apps and things like that, you'll need logins in order to use some of that stuff. And this is a licensing cost to support that.
And $150,000 for upgrade licensing for servers. We have servers out there with probably expired licenses.
Yeah, we have a number of 2008 servers that Microsoft is not supporting. DOA has been supporting a lot of those servers for us, and we just need to get our compliance back up with our Microsoft data center servers. So this will bring us up to the 2021 specification and cover all of our servers and our desktops. And patching.
$85,000 for internet portal for one-stop shopping. You know, we just want to, with the move to fee for service, providers are going to be more market-driven, and we've got to give them more refined access to reporting. We've got to be able to have everything in one place. They can get into our system. They can find things. It's awful fragmented, but also it's a communication tool so that when they log on, they will be able to contact any function in this agency. And we just got to get back to more of a systems approach as opposed to
Piecemeal.
well, it's piecemeal, it's phone calls, it's emails, it's you know, it's just we got to help. We got to kind of settle on a one way to communicate. And if there's a crisis, call us, but don't call us on every transaction because a lot of these are routine transactions. So by having a common way to communicate, I think things will be done faster and quicker in the normal course of operations as opposed to trying to track somebody down. And that we will have a live person on the back of all those feeds to be responsive to any inquiries.
Yeah, and it'll give us the ability to measure our service level that we're providing. Right now, if a call comes in and goes to billing or AP or whatever, that person may be on leave, right? So the provider may not get that email over to the right person at the right time. So what Pat's describing is a one-stop shop. All of our directives, our communication portal where we can send messages to certain people, uploading information. We have a portal now, but it's probably 10 or 15 years old and is not functional and it's not designed to aggregate data. If we want to send messages out to our providers, they want to collaborate back with us, live attendance and things like that, where they can ask questions on the fly. We could potentially have somebody in the agency to be able to answer questions from our providers. We give them a way to log into the system and get access to their Power BI reports as well. We can tighten up the security in Thera. So it's essentially a one-stop shop. When you are a provider of DDSN, you get a username and password to that portal, and we can target data to the prospective providers.
And two more routine things, server replacement for data center and a DB2 data migration. Mike, you don't feel like you have to comment on, there's routine pieces of equipment that we have to make the transition from to the
Yeah, our DB2 system right now is housed at the mainframe of DOA, and we have been moving from the billing within that system into Thera. We pay roughly about $1 million a year for that. If we migrate this DB2 data on site into our own SQL databases, we'll save $1 million a year. That's some time out, but we need to begin that migration because the technology and supporting that technology is extremely expensive. And as we move components from billing onto Thera, we'll have less reliant on that DB2 system. So our goal is to convert the data into a SQL database, create the portal around that SQL database, and the providers can have access to that data within that portal. So it's a multi-aspect project that we're trying to accomplish, but there are some significant savings for the agency by this small capital outlay.
$60,000 for a temporary contract accountant. We want to have one person fully dedicated to the 10% FMAP project. We're supporting multiple task forces, multiple streams of expenses and revenues and accountability, and we just want to have one person completely dedicated to that. We don't want to hire an FTE. We may find out that it's not the lift that we think it is, although I think it's a lift for the first 4 or 5 months. And we want to have a temporary person to come in to be the backbone so that we always have somebody fully engaged on that topic. We would like a $70,000 for Procurement Supervisor. We're asking it as a new position. In reality, right now we have 4 in procurement, and we had 5 about 18 months ago, and then we traded one person out. We thought we'd do it with 4. We can't do it with 4. We need to go back to 5. So it is technically a new position, but
Yeah.
we tried it. It didn't work. And our biggest risk is with all the procurement activity we have the volume of work, then we have the quality of work. And the quality of work is if we had more time by a higher level person, Candace in particular, we would be able to build better deliverables, negotiate better products. We'd be able to do more critical thinking to squeeze savings out of our procurements. Right now, especially at the regional centers, we have room to improve with more critical thinking from a business acumen position. And procurement, we're processing it to meet compliance. We got to take it to the next level. We're actually bringing business acumen to bear to get these contracts to get more value out of them. And we just need a little bit more horsepower in procurement.
That person would be for that much, that's salary of that person?
That's with fringe. That person would be below Candace, and it would free Candace up to do more of the business contracts. Like right now, we're in the middle of doing our fixed bid contract for 5 years, where basically every service we have goes through this contract. And I know we're several months behind on that contract that we got to get on. It's just because we don't have enough horsepower to somebody in procurement can make everybody better if they had the time to help them through. The problem now is people who are not experts in procurement are doing scopes of work because we help them with it, but it's just, we need more expertise and capability in our contracting side, because at the end of the day, we are a contracting business. We do regional centers. Everything else after that is we contract. And $100,000 for the continuation of the temporary contact update project. If you recall, during the middle of COVID, at one time, and the numbers have changed dramatically, we had 37 or 38,000 individuals eligible for services, and maybe 20 to low 20s getting services. So there was 15,000 people out there eligible, but who are they and what are they doing, and can we help them? And what we found, a lot of that was people that had been eligible, moved away, passed away. And so it's been a major cleanup project to clean our lists, but also identify people who may have been lost in the shuffle to get them on a waiver, to get them case management services. It is taking a lot longer to clean up that the system than we first anticipated. So Lori asked for 1 more year of, and these are temporary interns from USC colleges. Yeah. And I think it's well worth it to get us in a good position. And so basically it's about $944,000 for central office requests. And now we have another approximately $3 million, and these are more community focused and regional center requests. $478,000, as you recall. We still have 2 remaining legacy loans that DDSN was committed to make payments on for day programs, Chesco and Charleston day programs, and their payout is $470,000. So if we retire those 2 loans, we clear the books of that liability, and it would help us in the future with our cash flow.
So tell me a little bit about the history of those loans. When did they?
1 year and a half. I will do the Chesco loan, okay. And the Chesco loan is, I think it was sometime in the 2005-10 era. Babcock was under some stress, and they were downsizing, and they had people in the upper part of the county, and Chesco agreed to take over a day program up there, but we agreed to, I think, get loans to renovate it and fix it up. And so they took over a program to help us out, and we funded it, and we told them we'd pay it off. So I think that's a legacy loan that we promised to pay off, and we have to pay off. And back in 2017, 18, I think the commission said, yeah, let's honor what we promised, but let's stop that practice. So we stopped the practice, and these would be the last 2 legacy type payments, with the exception of there's one rental situation we're still working on. And we'll take care of that in the next 6 months. And so that was, and
So Rich-
Charleston's a much smaller one. Do you guys have any specifics other than, it might have been during like the recession years, and our practice had been to buy buildings for people, but we didn't have the cash flow, so instead of buying them, we agreed to get the loan and make the loan payment. So it's a promise DDSN made. DDSN from its origin has always been, we buy the buildings and you take care of the people, but over time, that's
Yeah.
evaporated and we're moving to a different model. So I think we are liable for them, and we can continue making payments and not making principal payment. It's just something, it's a good time to do it with the cash that we have available.
We need to do that, but we also need to make a motion, I think, as a commission, never do that again and not allow anybody to do that again without commission approval. We have to stop this program. This is very, 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 very partial, not impartial at all, and it has to stop.
I agree.
And that's the way to stop it, is to pay it off, and then maybe we should never do it again. And I'll talk about that in a commission.
Okay. All right.
All right. The next one is $50,000 for additional cameras at the regional centers. That will get us about 60 cameras. I'm not saying that we might need more or less, but I thought that was a good down payment to start that process.
Okay.
And we can always add to it if there's a greater need than that.
Barry, you have a question?
I kind
Or a
of,
thought?
go ahead, I kind of do.
Okay.
I don't know if this, I hope this is okay now to bring it up. Do we know, speaking of cameras, it's the reason this reminded me of when I was going over this the other day. When we're using these cameras, obviously part of the purpose of cameras is to have the information that those cameras are showing in a situation so that we can play it back.
Yes.
So my question is, how long do we have right now that we can play information back today if we want to see something that happened?
Two issues, and I'll let Mike talk, is our current policy, I think it's 60 days.
60 days.
Okay. There was some question here in the last month or so about that very issue, and I spoke to the head of risk division this week. And what I gleaned from her was that the vendor that has the cameras installed has greater capabilities than we originally realized, and that from her desk with an app, she can see any camera in all the building, in all the facilities, which I didn't think was possible until she told me that. And then when it comes to storage, if we want to go longer than 60 days, the vendor has storage capabilities. Now the question is, what's their cost versus what's Mike's cost? And of course, Mike wants to buy everything new and do it himself. I say, Mike, before we do it, let's check the vendor, see if we can get it cheaper. But we do need that capacity in case an event happens that we say, okay, we want to freeze a particular center's last 60 days. Well, then we'd need 60 more days for the current stuff. So we have that capability. And I don't think it's a budget line item because the vendor has a capability. And if it does cost, I think it's a normal cost, not an exceptional cost. But Mike has some comments and thoughts.
Yeah, a lot of what come out of recent, I guess, investigations or whatever, where certain folks in risk or quality may request a day's worth of storage, video from a particular center. Well, that's one day, but there's also 122 cameras associated with that. So the system is designed, as Pat mentioned, to hold 60 days worth of footage, but they want to extrapolate that 120 cameras on, let's say, May 5th. It takes a lot of storage to do that. And just to hold that until an investigation is complete. Right now, it's near to impossible to do that. So what we've been pushing back is they find the incident and we can extrapolate that incident, but not the entire day. But it's hard for them to put together their investigation if they don't have all 122 cameras pulled off of the system. So when it rolls past 60 days, it doesn't get erased. So that storage gives us the ability to take what we can't do now as far as pulling data and pull those, let's say a day or two, and put it to the side until an investigation is complete, whether it's internal or with SLED.
We can't do that now.
We can do it now, but we take excerpts. If there was a particular incident in one of the centers and it happened from 1 p.m. to 3 p.m. on last Friday, we can do that with no problem. And that's what we've been doing for the last whatever years. But when there's, let's get a whole day and all 122 cameras, that's unreasonable for the way our system is designed currently. So this extra storage will give us the ability to take it off of the camera systems so the retention policy doesn't erase it, and it can be accessible on our network outside of the camera system for SLED or local quality or risk to do their assessment.
Right, and so their new storage opportunity or option that we didn't know about extends the 60 days?
Yeah.
Or is it still within the 60 days?
Yeah, so we can extend a camera solution to cover years, but there's a cost associated with that. Most of our camera solution goes from 60 days. It's built around the policy. Policy says 60 days. They can handle 60 days today.
Right.
Some of them handle a little bit more, but the policy says 60 days.
Our policy.
Our policy says 60 days. If we change that policy to be 90 or 180 days, that's going to require capital costs because they're not built for past 60 days. Does that make sense?
Right.
Okay, well, my question is, my real question is, I would think it would be, instead of 60, we need to be able to get all those 100 some cameras for, let's say we wanted to get all 60 of those cameras for one day, for a day. How much money are we talking about to make that occur?
So what we're talking about here is that it's an anomaly. A request for all cameras on all systems
For one day.
for one day, that's an anomaly. We rarely get that type of request. So we're not talking about outfitting each camera system with the ability to do that. We're talking about buying a device here to hold that storage. That can hold 1 day, maybe 5 days, maybe 10 days, but it's going to hold a lot of storage until the investigation is complete. And we'll set an auto deletion after 180 days because people don't often tell, hey, it's okay to delete that now. So we want a device here where we can service the needs of SLED and our quality and risk team to do their due diligence in any investigation.
That's just like an offline storage,
It's an offline storage. That's exactly what it is.
and that works.
But that's not, where is that in this?
No, here, I didn't put it in there because, I mean, I might want that, but like, we're not gonna get it until we're sure the vendor can't do it. And what,
Well, how much money are we talking about if we decide to get it ourselves and the vendor can't do it?
Well, we're talking about $50,000 to $60,000 for an offline storage device.
What, would that be similar to a computer except it'd be a storage device, or would it be?
It'll be a storage device. And the idea behind it is
Would it be like in a room? Is it like something the size of a room?
it'll be our data center. It'll be a small device about this big, about the size of a server. And it will fit in our data center in one of our server racks, and it'll just store data. Whenever there's a problem at PD, Midlands, or whatever, we would take that data across the wire and put on that device. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And it takes it out of the system. So the problem with using the vendor's storage solution is if you save critical data onto his solution and there's a problem with his solution at some point and there's an investigation going on, you lose 60 days plus the investigation data. So I tend to take it off of that system and house it in a tertiary solution to make sure we can keep it and preserve it.
Because the you're saying that the provider, if they could do it,
the vendor.
the vendor, if they could do it themselves, even though we would save a lot of money, we don't know what it would cost us either. We need to find out, I guess, what it would cost us with them.
We do not have the incremental cost for what the vendor will charge, and I've asked Chris to give me the incremental cost. We will pursue that first before we buy more equipment.
So I know that the Regional Center Task Force wants to spend some time on this topic. So I think that will be a place where a lot of these discussions will really be drilled down on in terms of, having people weigh into it more so we're better informed on what, what some of the challenges are, but beyond what we just talked about here. Because this is just a brief little snapshot of the
We will meet
camera
whatever the needs
situation.
are. I just want to exclude vendor capabilities.
Yeah.
before we start doing our own.
Well, we need to see what-
Absolutely,
We need to see what our vendor capabilities are first.
Sure.
We need to see what the option is.
And we're waiting for that.
Yeah, okay.
But you're talking about $400,000. Is that what you said if we had to do it ourselves?
No, but 50 to 60,000.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
all right. Well, then that's a little bit different. Okay, I was thinking, you said 400. Okay,
No,
go ahead.
I don't think we said 400 for something else.
I'm
So
sorry.
we'll take 400,000 if you're generous.
Yeah.
I
Trust me.
just,
I gotta chainsaw his budget.
I guarantee you, buddy, he's got a budget to have. Woo, boy. Scare us all, man.
We will
Okay,
take whatever they need. I understand the urgency.
okay, so for this discussion, we're really just talking about additional cameras. We know we need some more in the regional centers. And
Well,
we'll,
we don't know how many more. We don't know if 60's gonna do it or
right.
if 30's gonna do it or.
Again, I mean, I think
Really?
this was a request from staff, right? The 60 cameras,
It was,
or how, was it 60?
it came from, we're getting requests, and the request that was brought to my attention was a regional center wanted to get 13 cameras to put it somewhere to watch copper.
Right, theft, you're right.
I'm not gonna put cameras to watch copper.
Right,
We're not gonna do
copper
it.
theft,
So
right.
we have to have some
We're
criteria.
looking for security for people and not like equipment.
And so it has to go through a mechanism that has both legal necessity. You know, we just can't go out and put a camera anywhere we want. There's certain legal things we can't do. We also have to realize that when we put cameras out there, it is a certain invasion, but there are needs out there, but we have to systematically figure what the needs are.
Right.
And this is just a starter group of money for 60 cameras. And if we need more, we'll do more. I just don't want to create the impression that if someone has an itch, we're going to put a camera up.
Right, okay. Well,
And that's where it has to go through legal, it has to go through just common sense. We will put
Yeah.
cameras where they need them.
Right.
For sure.
And some companies can provide that extra storage. You agree with that, Mickey?
Yeah, some companies will have, you work in the casino, there's 1,000 cameras, right? But when you go into an organization or an agency and you're trying to put cameras, there's usually a reason why you're putting them. And then at some point you have to understand where they're positioned and have the coverage, the clarity, right? To protect whatever I'm trying to protect. And I understand that they probably have done this many years ago, but as to Pat's point, are we still in that same directive or mode, right? We can't start morphing off into buying cameras for certain things because we'll have a camera every square foot, right? So it's prudent for us to make sure that these requests meet the original meaning for the camera system because we'll have overrun.
Yeah, and main place that I think, well, one of the places we need them is outside, as far as we can go. But anyway, I don't know if this 60 is part of that outside or not, but.
all right, but again, I think this will be
It's really, that's right. We're
an
really
issue
going
for the
beyond
task
what-
force
that's right,
to
it really is,
really
but-
drill down, see what each facility has, what do they need, where do they need it, why do they need it, how long should we store it?
And then we gotta
what
make
are
sure it's
the
legal
options
and all that
of-
sort of thing.
Yeah,
And
so,
we worked with the vendor this past 2 weeks to get a CAD drawing of every facility and every camera and where they're located and where they're pointed.
great.
And that can be great for a starting point for the task force.
Yeah, it can be.
Do we have authorized vendors in that security
Yes.
space that more than one, we can look at the various ones to see?
We currently use CodeLinks, their state-provided contract source. They have put the camera systems in every one of our facilities, and they do a pretty decent job with supporting us, and the cost is relatively at the market. So I don't know if we're in the business of looking at changing that out, but they offer some of the latest and greatest technology as it pertains to security right now.
In your space, have you ever heard of Vivint? Some people call it Vivint.
Yeah, I have that at the house. Yeah, it's a pretty good, but it's more or less residential, not a commercial application.
CPI is more
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah.
How do you like CPI?
They all use the same back-end technology, CPI, Vivint, what's the big one, ADT?
ADT?
They use the same back-end technology, but as I've said, it's mainly for off-the-shelf residential type application. Code Link are in some of the largest hospitals, most of the state agencies, and they have a reputation to stretch and support the state currently, so.
So, but you have not seen where DDSN needs that extra storage based upon the requirements, say, of SLED or any of the others. We still are able to meet the requirements?
Yeah,
as
I mean, what we have
currently
right now
stand?
for our system currently, our system is designed and working the way it was intended to. Now, when we get outside these anomaly requests, a day's worth of storage of 122 cameras, that's beyond what it's built and scoped for. And additional storage supports those type of requests.
So basically, so I'm clear. One master system.
No, we have 5 systems.
Okay. Go ahead.
We have 5 systems, and each of those systems are housed at each one of the locations.
Okay.
And they're identical, or they're nearly identical systems, have the same storage, and they support the same camera models.
So when you're looking into a system, system 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, if you want something out of system 5, you have to actually go to system 5 to.
No, I have a single pane of glass where I can look at all 5 systems from a single application.
Okay. So if you wanted to add more, you can.
If we had a 6 regional office, I would add it, and it would show up in that single pane of glass.
Okay, I'm clear.
All right.
The next one is $800,000 for, we call it non-CPIP improvement projects at the regional centers, focused on resident quality of life. Last year, a typical year for us is about $3.5 million in CPIP projects, roofs, major improvements. And that's about all we could put to work. I mean, I think if we have more people, we might be able to implement more. And then $300,000 that are in the regional centers budgets for day-to-day operations, plumbing, broken plumbing, loads, all those kind of painting, handyman stuff. And then last year, we had $400,000, which we call non-CPIP money, which are projects less than $100,000, because over $100,000 has to be a CPIP. But these are like more than a regional center budget can absorb, such as a major recarpeting, major new furniture, those type of quality of life issues. And so what we're going to do is add another $800,000, which will give us an even $5 million for improvements to the regional centers. And one of the benchmarks this agency used to use is our individuals that are in the ICF regional centers. The way it works is basically most of their income is assigned over to the government, to Medicaid, to us, to offset their expenses. And that's about $4.8 million a year. And in the past, the benchmark was, let's try to recirculate that money and keep it in the regional centers to maintain the maintenance of the assets there. So for many years, we have not been able to reach that 4.8 because of financial issues. And by adding this $800,000, it'll get us to $5 million, which is $200,000 greater than the care and maintenance. So $5 million may seem like a lot, but if you've been to regional centers, it's not. And on top of that $5 million, 4.8 of it will be funded with the residents' own funds. So I think that it's a good place to start. And the way this money will work is the 400 that's in plus the 800, the 1.2, will be controlled by central office. Regional centers will submit their project requests that will get approved by Rufus and Andrew to make sure that we're just using that money wisely. And then we'll execute it quickly without going through a CPIP project because it's less than $100,000. And I think they can reasonably do it without being wasteful. If we added any more, they might just, you can contract anything out and maybe be a little on the wasteful side.
Right.
But I think we all agree they need a shot in the arm, and this is a good start.
Regional centers are definitely.
And then the last one is the $1.4 million for bed fees for fiscal year 22 that the commission has already approved.
Right, and then you skipped over the 4 investigators.
Oh, the 4 investigators, okay. And the 4 investigators, and that is just, as you all know, just to bring independence and objectivity and the capacity to do things without all these collateral duties hanging around the investigator's neck. Is put 1 in each regional center and have them report to risk management for investigations. And then there's some footnotes down here. In Policy Risk Division, there's a number of technologies that we've been talking about for about a year. They don't have anything sketched out with any specificity, and plus, HHS is considering maybe being part of the financing of these systems that would not only benefit us, but they'd benefit other operations at HHS, and then therefore we would have just one system that would be to everybody's best interest. And then if they get involved, we can definitely take advantage of a 90-10 match as opposed to the 50-50 match available to us. So they're in the works, and they may come to the commission during the year, but they're not formed up enough to make a presentation. But I want to let you know that they're out there under consideration. And then we have the Kronos timekeeping system at the regional centers. We all think it's a very important thing to do. I think the price has come down substantially. It was up well over 300, now it's 220. I didn't put it in the budget because there's so much stress on the regional centers with staffing. They do not need to implement a new timekeeping system now. They need to be more stable before we do that. But just to let you know, it's out there. And if we stabilize, staffing gets up, I think it would be a good idea later in the fiscal year. So that's our proposal. There's a lot of ways you can look at it. And then the last page is page 25 is our overhead. And that's just how the division funds line up. And other than information technology, there are very few non-personnel funds in this building. It's basically personnel plus IT has their recurring non-personnel costs. And when you look at our overall, for many years we talked about our overhead, and under the current administrative contract where we centralize every penny of overhead we have, you can see we're at about 22 plus million in administrative costs, and that's going to be on a expenditure of 850 million, which is 2.6%, which I think is very, very reasonable to make.
Where would our contract for
850 million being the total expenditures for a year.
Yes.
Alliance be on this plan?
Alliant, it would be in our IT budget.
So it wouldn't necessarily be itemized here on the spending.
It's definitely in our administrative contract. It would be itemized. Like if you look at IT budget 4.8 million, it's in there. Personnel and non-personnel costs. And we can break them down further. But that's the only budget was
where it was placed, I guess.
You don't have to vote on it, but because the commission vote on it, but I just.
Right.
So
So
where is that administrative cost sheet? I don't have one of those here. I thought I had brought them down.
so your plan would be to bring this to the commission this month
Yes,
and ask us to approve it?
yes.
Okay. All right, well, if anybody else doesn't have any questions, obviously, we can reach back to Pat anytime
Or
before,
anytime, yeah. There's a lot of
the next
process.
meeting, if we need more clarity on anything or, have questions. But we can move on if no one else has anything on this
All right.
spending plan. Okay.
Go to page 26 of your PDF.
Okay.
And again, it's a lot of data, but I just want to draw your eye. This is, it's a draft document. I'm waiting for one more piece of information from HHS to finalize it. We did our fiscal year 19 cost report, and This is the result of it. The only thing that's missing is there's still some Medicaid revenue that HHS, when they make retro rate payments back to us during the fiscal year, they give us a lump sum. We don't have that data. They were going to collect that data, and I'm sure they have it now, but it may add a little bit more revenue. But what I want to bring your eye to is the things marked in yellow. And what that shows is, because we talk about cost reports a lot, here's a live example that we all can understand from. You have that or no? You don't have it, do you? Here, you know this?
No,
It's this type here, right?
There you go.
oh, I do, but I don't, sorry.
It's the, so it's the yellow, and what that number means is in 19, we had Medicaid costs of $584,000 and billable revenues of $530, which left excess cost in the system of $50 million. Now that number may go down a little bit based on some adjustments by HHS, but I don't think it would come down substantially. What that shows is that our rates have not kept up with our costs, and a lot of that are it's basically state funds, unmatched state funds. And so that's when we go to fee for service, if you could visualize all that being matched properly, that'll be excess revenue in the system, which you take 70% of that number, is a big number. So that's what we're all striving for, and that's the real economic benefit of fee for service, is we can match so much better. The other thing else I want to draw your eye to is when you look at each of the cost settlement categories, there's about 10 of them above that number. There's 2 in red. They're the ones where we do not have enough cost in them to cover the Medicaid revenue. So currently, under the one-way settlement rules as we know them, we may have $50 million in excess cost in the system, but if we're under on 2 categories, we got to pay recoupments for those 2 categories, those $2 million, and the extra $48 million that we had in there, we get no credit for. And I think that's been our challenge the whole time, that there's a level of unfairness there. But they're the rules we go by, and so we have to abide by them. I'm just hopeful as we go through the cost process that some consideration be given, that maybe we're not asking for any kind of 2-way settlement. We're just with some consideration of the excess cost at that magnitude being applied to the small overages to maybe not have to pay that cost settlement back. But
So how do you get that?
we have to come to final conclusions, and HHS will make a determination and say, hey, you guys owe us $2 million. And we'll say, hey, we got $50 million over here, and we'll say, you owe us $2 million. So it is what it is. I mean, certain Medicaid rules are very specific, and we need to abide 100% by the rules. It's just one of those situations where when you're running a system like ours that's capitated, where we encourage providers to spend demand money where they need it, and there's excess cash in the system, if 2 of them come up a little short, we are still liable for those 2 shortages, despite having excess elsewhere. I'm just describing a reality of the Medicaid system.
Yeah.
And so we will have to work these out when we finalize all of our settlements. And most of them are going to look like this, certainly not to this extent, but I do envision some that are a little under and a lot that are over, but the little unders do not get compensated by those that are over.
So would you consider that non-controllable? Is that a good word?
It's absolutely not controllable. And as the excess comes down in the system, the risk of these variances become bigger. And that's one of the issues that we have to deal with going to fee for service, is that when HHS, when we work through HHS, because we're a sister state agency, that immediately triggers whatever money they give us or we bill for, we've got to show certified public expenditures to match it or pay it back. And so that it raises the liability risk that even though we spend it correctly, if it isn't spent in the right buckets, we may have some liability issues going forward. It's just something that we have to address and manage. But when we give money to our provider network, we can't always control where it goes, as well as if they have one one program that they're very efficient at, and they use the money for another program that they have an issue with, they are serving our people better, but it may create a financial risk for us. It's just at the margin. It's something that we have to manage our way through. But that's the environment we're in.
And we don't know what's going to happen with that until we get the cost report.
I think we just have to get them all done and go over there and sit down with them and have them reassess. I mean, you'll get difference of, I just feel like all the talk about one-way settlements, we have not one-way settled yet since 13. And when we sit down with them, we'll just have to follow the rules and do what we need to do. And if there's an exception in there or a rule that maybe we don't fully understand, but currently that's my understanding that if we're over, thank you very much. If you're under, write us a check.
So basically what you're saying to us is that you have duly and properly noted that to DHHS.
Is there
What he's saying is, we don't know how many millions we have to pay because of it.
No, that's not.
I envision 13, 14, and 15 looking a lot like this with
He's still going through the cost reports and we'll share them with DHHS when he feels they're in a good spot, because
I'm the last reviewer, and we have to make some
sign it,
adjustments.
and you have to put your name to it,
We
right?
will get it done here in September for sure.
And
All I'm
so-
saying is that it's not that you didn't make them aware.
No. We've talked about this for years.
That's where I'm at.
And
Yes.
we just
Yes.
gotta close one and see how it actually works out.
So yeah, cost reports weren't submitted like they were supposed to be submitted for many, many years from DDSN to DHHS, and so now we're doing it. So it's,
And it's thanks to the person before Chris, who was negligent, to say the least. We'll go from there.
Anyway, so hopefully by September, Pat feels like he will have gone through all the cost reports, and been and is able to send something to DHHS he feels
Yes.
is accurate and good, and then we'll know for sure at that time
What the liability
what we have to owe. Right. And he's thinking this year of 19 looks like it would be around $1 million to,
It'd be the 1.1 day, 55,
Yeah.
and 2 million.
But we're going back to 13. So-
right, so we'll, I
Right.
think some other years you're
2 or 3
feeling.
million a year adds up.
Right. So we just have to be prepared for that, that's all I'm saying,
Yes.
in this budget.
Yes.
And I think what Pat is also saying is that the folks we are dealing with over there at DHHS are open-minded.
I'm hoping that when we actually land it and work it out, that, I don't know,
Yeah,
when you look at it, it's just so disproportional of how much excess is in there, but the rules are the rule, and Medicaid is so valuable to the state, and it's an open-ended 70% match. We'll do what we have to do, but it's just something that we really,
Right.
we need to keep an eye on, see if there's a way
right.
to see if there's a different route.
Okay. Sounds good. The last item on the agenda is, for Pat, is the CFO report.
I just have one issue, and it's just, it's a statement of a problem and a recommendation by me that I do not want to vote for. I just want to warm you up and get some feedback, and then next Thursday, I think I will make a recommendation.
Okay.
The dilemma that we have is we have 3 appropriations, 10 million for residential waiver, 7 million for respite, and 12 million for the 2.5% increase to the community as well as us. And we are given state dollars, of which the only way we can do this and not lose money is to get rate increases. To get rate increases, the mechanics are the Executive Budget Office sometime late in August or early September will look at our analysis of the FTEs in our healthcare community, and they will give us some funds. And the way they give us funds, I don't even get into, there's some complexity there, but they're going to give us some money. And once we get that, then we can do the analysis, add in, because the 2.5% rate changes really cut across all of our service lines. We have to bump every service a click to generate the rate increases to pay for this. So we have to hold up our housing and respite until these are done. So I don't think I would get rates over there till September 3rd, 4th, or 5th. And then they have to do their processes. And when HH does their processes, they have certain restraints that are known but not factored into how we are appropriated. Meaning, for some service lines like waiver, they may be able to retroactive back to July 1st. For other service lines, such as ICS, they won't be able to retro it back to the 1st. So there's all these complexities. And I say that because historically, what this agency has done is, particularly with the bans and two-way settlements, is we would get an appropriation, and the first thing we would do is we would throw that money in the bans and front the money. And then we would go get the rates. Well, historically, we'd throw the money in the bans. And our ability to, A, get the rates, or B, follow through with the rates, or get a complete rate was very problematic because of the difficulty. And in fairness to HHS, is when we two-way settled, it really wasn't a big deal because we always came out whole. And the reason we have so much excess cost in the system is years and years and years of putting money in, but not getting enough rate increases to cover it. And so in my job here, my rule is, unless there's an exception, which I'm thinking about asking for exception, is, look, I only get this much money. I can't give you this much money until I get the rates. And when I get the rates, my estimation, it might be October or November before we get the rate changes. Okay, and then the rate changes I get, I still have little confidence that we're going to get all the rates we need in order to come out whole. And in my math, what I'm thinking about doing is, because we are sitting on so much cash reserves, that there's a consideration, look at prepare you like me, I don't want to do it either, is to go ahead and prepay the funds and keep on chasing the rates. Now, conceptually, it doesn't make a difference. I think practically speaking, if I front load the money, my ability to get the rates may be diminished. You follow me? Mm-hmm. And the simple math I have in my head is, and then the compounding effect of this is, and it's probably a good effect, is if the IDRD waiver works out like we suspect and hope, that there's rate increases across the board, come January 1st, they're going to get new rate increases for everything. So I think we have like a 6-month problem here. So we're going to work up a proposal, and I may not even give it to you after I work it up, but I have to do it to be diligent, that to prepay in a very complicated way these funds so that providers have the funds. And then we're basically fronting the money until we get the rates. And I can tell you, we probably won't come out whole either way. But I think as an agency with the reserves we have and the needs that we hear out there, that we ought to consider doing that, which goes against my grain, with the exception of we're still in a COVID world, and we're sitting on cash reserves. So that's all I want to say is, all I want to say is, I wouldn't have considered it 2 months ago, and if we didn't have the reserves we have, I wouldn't consider it.
So what would you do?
What would you do if we didn't have
reserves? Yeah.
If we didn't have reserves, I would say this transaction, put it this way, I'm hoping this is the last time this ever happens. We did this 2 years ago, and we thought that in the future, all COLAs should come through rate increases. And we're thankful the General Assembly gave us this problem. I'd rather have the problem and money than not the problem. All I'm saying, in the future, when it comes to a fee-for-service world, all COLAs should come through rates. It shouldn't come through, give us a hunk of money and then change the rates. You follow me? So in order to navigate this complexity, if we would lower money, everybody just have to wait. And when we finally got to the finish line, we'd probably have to put some state funds in to make all this work.
We might, but we don't know.
But no, we are either way, but I do believe we would be in a less advantageous position. If we front it, we have less leverage to get rates than if we wait until we get rates. So that's the challenge in my head. It's
That's right, if we front it, they're less likely to give us the rates, I would say, than they are if we don't.
I would say it undermines people's urgency.
That's right. Because they say, well, let them float it.
I am bringing it up. I'm not in love with the idea, but I do believe sometimes circumstances require consideration. So I'm not even proposing it. I may not propose it. All I'm saying is we would be remiss not to consider that because of two reasons. One, need, and two, well, and there's a certain amount of precedent, but in 2 years ago we did this. We waited until we got the rates, and we literally waited till January. But that's the awkward situation that we're in. It reminds, and I don't want to do it for a couple of reasons, because, and I also want to compare the world that we're hopefully going to, where increases are handled through rates, because if it's handled through rates, we'd adjust our rates, we'll all be done. But if we go through this, what I'll suggest, with this process, whether we wait until we get the rates or do it early, either way, the amount of staff time it takes to do this is exorbitant. And if we fronted it, it would even be more staff time. We ain't got staff time to waste, but that's the Swiss watch that we have. And we need to get, and getting out of the bands gets us out of this Swiss watch mode and gets us more into a Timex mode where things just work. But I have to bring it up only because I see the pressure, I see our reserves, I know the downside, but that's what I'm thinking. I'll talk to you guys offline about it. But that's something that at least I need to consider.
Well, I heard you use the term complicated way, and I imagine you're going to deep dive more into that, and then as we fish it out, we'll see as we move along. That's what I'm hearing.
And it's nobody's fault. It's the awkward system that we're in. And for everybody to do their part, it's going to be 3 or 4 months. And it sounds, from the government perspective, we're doing all we can do. From the provider's perspective is, hey, I see we're going to get a pay raise on July 1st, and it's Thanksgiving. Okay, so that's a reality too that we have to look at. You know, is that appropriate? Well, we're working the system we have, and if everybody was flush with reserves, it would just be a timing issue. But I don't think everybody's flush with reserves, so it's something to consider. And I'm talking offline because I'm conflicted as well, but I had to bring it up.
Yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks, Pat. So our next meeting is September 7th, and can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? We are adjourned,
Thank you.
and the time is
4:25 p.m.